Okay. Well, first off, Tom, welcome to San Francisco. I think I've seen television 9 times here in San Francisco a decade ago, and
I don't think we played 9 times.
You did the Stone tour of 3 Stones and Gabriel.
What's the Stones?
Keystone Palo Alto, Keystone San Francisco, and Keystone Berkeley. And then I saw
Right,
you
I
open
remember that.
for
That's
Gabriel.
right. That's right. There were those Keystone clubs.
And then after that, of course, the Waldorf.
Do they exist, these places, anymore?
No, they've turned into like heavy metal clubs. They were bought out by the guy that did those Nady systems.
Oh, yeah.
John Nady or something.
Yeah.
So they're like heavy metal thrash clubs now.
Oh, yeah.
And now you're back. The new album. It's television, by television, and produced by television. Did you want to keep everything sort of incestuous within the group? Or did you want to establish like the group identity apart from everyone's solo pieces that you've done in the past decade? Or was it both?
It was neither, actually. It was just we didn't come up with a title for the record, so we just left the title off. And the production thing was just basically we put a mic in front of an amp and move it around till it sounds good, and that's about it. You know, there's no other hired hands on the record or anything, so basically me and Fred sort of produce it, though, I think it'd be fair to say.
Okay, and he's worked a lot with you on your own solo stuff and played with you, so there was that closeness. What was the studio like?
Actually, it wasn't much bigger than these 2 offices. In fact, probably wasn't even as wide, but it does happens to have like one room that's drum-wise, it's just, you can hardly walk in there when the guy's playing because it's brick walls and wood floors and just totally great sound for drums, you know. And a little homemade board, actually, more sophisticated than the one you got there, but not that far away from that. Not a computer board or anything. And simple little thing, simple place.
Now, in the earlier television stuff, a lot of the songs, such as Marquee Moon and Breaking in My Heart and songs like that, had a gestation period of years before they were actually committed to recording. Are some of the songs on this album also stretching that far back for you? Did you write in the studio?
No, these are all, I'd say, stuff that came up since '91. I would say a couple of them actually came out of jam sessions we had in the studio. Like Rocket was basically, me and Billy were in there late one night playing around with this beat, and we listened to the tape the next day and figured, I had some other ideas for it, so that became a song. And Rhyme was also a jam, which I sort of took a tape home and found the best bits from, and then we relearned them. And this tune also was about 12 minutes long, and we just cut the last 8 minutes off it, I guess.
Wow. Live, do these songs stretch out then?
Yeah, some of them, 1880's probably one that stretches out the most. Yeah, they're all a little bit longer, I'd say. Some cases much longer.
All right. Television has been covered by so many people, from Simple Minds to Bowie to Lloyd Cole to Aztec Hammer, the Bunnymen, Chris Conley, Russ Tolman, True West, Steve Wynn. Any particular covers that you like that people have done of your material that you think stand out, that you enjoyed hearing it?
Well, some of those guys covered Verlaine songs as opposed to television songs, yeah. Although it's the same writer in that case anyway, but I like hearing cover versions just because you're so outside of it. When you hear it, you don't even know what it is for like 30 seconds. And then you go, oh, I see, this is sort of interesting. Actually, the Echo and the Bunnymen version of Friction was on an EP. It was done live in some club in Sweden. This was actually incredibly good. In fact, I was amazed at how good it was in terms of recreating something. In terms of messing around with something, the Susie and the Banshees version of Little Johnny Jewel was like pretty interesting.
Yeah,
they made a very military kind of thing out of it, but it's still real interesting to hear.
I barely recognized it the first time. What were the first live shows like this year for you? Did you play around in New York first and then go
No, we just got an opportunity to go to these like basically the three biggest festivals, summer festivals in Europe. So we just grabbed that because they were all in the same 3 days in 3 different countries. So that thing, it's just so easy to do. I mean, you walk out and it's daylight and there's a hill covered with people or something, and there's no sound check. You just plug in and play and leave, and it's really easy to do. I mean, everybody in the group's been playing so long. It's like the longer you play, the easier it is, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Now, the last 2 times I've seen you here in San Francisco, you've been acoustic.
Mm-hmm.
It must feel great to be with the band again, and
oh, well, I miss this acoustic stuff, actually. Tell you the truth, I was thinking of doing, because we had last night off, I wanted to get an acoustic gig here, but I couldn't get it in time, you know. Because that has an intimacy thing to it that I really miss out of electric stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that I mind electric stuff, but the acoustic thing is, because you can tell stories, and a band thing is a different thing, and so if you can't hear the singer that well, you can't follow it, and then everything gets all messed up. But if you're on your own, or, you know, you can do a lot more storytelling things and stuff like that.
That was one of the high points that I got from Russ Tolman when he saw your last acoustic show in Los Angeles was, man, the stories are great.
Yeah, it's fun to do.
I always wanted to ask you about this particular thing here.
What is that one?
The Blue Rose single.
Oh, you know what that is? That's a misprint.
Yeah.
I don't even have one of these, actually. You got yourself a... God, I've seen the 12-inch of this. I never saw a 7-inch of this.
Now, what came
that
first?
Blue Rose,
that
the porno vocal buried in the background, actually. There's all... God, I just want to look at this.
Sure.
So they printed it right on the
label.
On the label, but wrong on the sleeve. Well, that was just a thing. That again is an example of a jam thing that we had when we were doing that record, and I basically had asked the drummer to play this beat and asked the bass player to play something, and we just jammed it out and edited it down and put a few more guitars on it, and then I put a vocal on it, which sounded, when we went to actually do it, we made a mix with the vocal, and then I took the vocal off and pushed the guitars up. It sounded better. So when they wanted something for the single, I remember that was laying around.
Yeah, it's certainly a prized possession for me. So that's pretty cool. You've said in a number of interviews that your favorite television album was the Arrow bootleg. Are there any plans for recording television live for a new release coming out?
Right. Well, Arrow isn't a bootleg, or maybe it started as a bootleg, but it's now available, much to our dismay, actually on CD in Europe, because the guy we made a deal with this cassette-only company in like 1980, I think it was. And he proceeded 2 years ago to sell the rights to CD it all over Europe and Japan, and didn't pay us in time. And it actually sounds better on vinyl. If you ever find the vinyl of it, it sounds, because it's all compressed and smashed together. And on the CD, it doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't have that quality to it. What I like about that, it was just, you know, it's a mono recording of a band in a small club that actually happened to sound good. Most small clubs, you throw a mic in the air, it just doesn't sound that good, but this one did, and the mix was, you could really hear everything. So it just represented the band at a certain time that, in a way that I thought was great, you know. If we do something like that again, it probably won't be for a couple of years.
So there are long-term plans then, at least up in the air ones?
Yeah, I mean, it'd be nice to keep going. I mean, these days the economics of it are outrageous. It's just so expensive to tour. Unless you're playing to 6,000 to 10,000 people a night, you got to be borrowing money all the time just to keep there, you know.
That's got to be another added attraction of touring by yourself with an acoustic guitar.
Yeah, but I mean, you don't make a hell of a lot of money doing that either. It's just that somehow, I mean, I like the independence of that myself. And the other thing about that is if you write a song that night, you can go and play it. If you do that with a band, then you go to a sound check and go, you want to try something new, and you know, somebody may go, oh, Christ, I don't know, I got a headache today, I don't want to learn a song. So it's a different bag.
What covers are you doing live now in your set? Have you picked up new things, or are we going to hear, for instance, Knocking on Heaven's Door, maybe?
No. But I think the only one we do sometimes now, we sometimes do Psychotic Reaction.
Yeah.
And although at the moment the drummer doesn't want to do it, 'cause I don't know why. It's so easy to play, but for some reason he wants to get a cue together or something. And the other one is a Chocolate Watch Band song, which was from Ride on Sunset Strip movie called Don't Need Your Lovin' Anymore.
Yeah.
Which is basically a rip-off of an old Kinks tune called Milk Cow Blues, I think.
I think Milk Cow Blues, when I was growing up, was one of the songs that everybody who had a guitar from age 8 to like 14 was playing
Had to
and
play
jamming
it,
in their garage.
two chord tunes. Yeah.
In your own material, your solo material, there's lots and lots of layered guitars and little, two-note riffs that you add and things like that. How is that different for you in recording when you're playing up against someone like Richard Lloyd? How is it arranged different? What do you do with it?
Well, it's not that different because in some cases I'm showing Richard parts that I can't play while I sing. So, and on other occasions it's really different from song to song. Sometimes he won't have a part until he's got his guitar solo on tape, and we'll take a bit of that solo and use that. He'll learn what he played again, and he uses that as a part through the song. On another song, he might just be playing the chord bit, and yet on another song, he may have come up with a kind of counterpoint part to either my guitar part. And in certain places, he's doubling the bass. He's just listening to the bass and playing along with the bass. So the better ones are when he comes up with something that there's this kind of counterpoint thing where you have these kind of two-voiced guitars, neither of which that are just hitting chords.
You guys kind of dance around each other in a way.
Right. Some of that's, like I say, some of that I arrange, and some of it he comes up with. A lot of it's rehearsal as well. It's definitely a lot more rehearsal involved with the band because everybody wants to put something forth, and it takes sometimes a long time to come up with the right combinations of things. Whereas with a solo thing, you just hire a guitar player and go. You basically go to the studio and go, here's the song. You run it down once, and then you ask him for a part if he hasn't got one after 10 minutes, and then you record it. So.
Now, I'd like to ask you a bit about your writings in the poetry vein and storytelling vein. On Words from the Front, there's a little bit on the sleeve, a little story about darkness.
That's in cover. It's in the cover record, actually.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
And it alludes there to an upcoming book of stories. Has that ever come out? Will it? And what about your own poetry?
Yeah. Well, at the time, it's funny, that record came out about a month later. Somebody from Doubleday called me up and asked if I wanted to do this, and I said, yeah, I've just got to put these together. And then I went to live in England and figured I'd have a lot of time there to write. But I didn't, actually, because I started working over there. So I never got this thing quite finished. I don't know if I ever will. Yeah, that's sort of the state of that.
Now, when you first came to New York, according to Jim Carroll, you were first a poet and then got involved with bands.
Well, actually, yeah, when I went there, it was really early on. It was like 68, I guess, and I played with a few guys. It was all like Allman Brothers type stuff, which I didn't even like in 68, and so I had a guitar all the time, but I was much more concentrated on writing. It's true, for years, maybe 5 or 6 years. And then I remember going out to see some bands in around 72. I think it was like the New York Dolls and a couple other bands, which I didn't care for at all. And I thought, well, maybe I should put together a band because I could use some of this kind of stuff I was writing along with music and the whole thing. And that's how that eventually became television, I guess you could say, that kind of thing.
And have you done, in the last few years, any sort of spoken word at all?
No, because you can always, well, like with the acoustic thing, you can throw that in, and I always like it more with music. I heard these Henry Rollins records, I don't know if you ever heard those, but he's just speaking, and he has a lot of humor in it, so it carries itself in the way he does it. But there's very few spoken word stuff that I really like. There's a couple of Richard Burton, the actor. I think he's doing Shakespeare, and these are just great to listen to because his voice is so strong.
Hey, you watch an old movie with him too. It's amazing how much presence he had, how forceful he was.
Incredible,
before, like, disintegrated or whatever.
Yeah.
See here. Just for personal, have you seen Russ Tolman recently over in Europe or anything? He's been over there for the past 4 months.
I don't think I've seen Russ Tolman since, like, I don't even remember what year it was. I think 83, somebody from EMI Records gave us some money to go do a demo tape.
At Bearsville,
At Bearsville, yeah. Which probably wasn't, in retrospect, a really good demo tape. I mean, I don't think I even have a copy. I think it was released on some little record, actually, lately, because someone sent me a vinyl of it, and it said, blah, 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 these 3 tracks were originally...
it's on, like, Skyclad Records or something like that. I picked it up myself.
No, I haven't seen or heard from any of those guys. I think the bass player passed away, I heard.
Yeah, Kevin did a few years ago. He had pneumonia and a heart problem at the same time. It was not a good thing. What's this television tour like? Where have you been already? Is it basically the States now that you've done Europe, or where are you going to be out for a while?
Well, we did a week in Japan, which is about as much as you can do there. And that's one of my favorite places to play, actually, because it's beautifully designed theaters where you can really hear everything, and I don't know, they're just so careful and quick about everything. Like, you walk into a sound check and it's done in 10 minutes, and the lights are good, and everything's really just well organized. And then we went to Europe. We just did France and Scandinavia basically, in a show in London, so we got to go back there, I think, in the spring. And then we just did some East Coast dates and Canadian dates. So we probably stop next week, and then we go out again in late January.
Now, speaking of France, any French poets that you've been reading lately? Any chance, or someone you can turn us on to?
Not that I've read lately. I mean, I think when I first moved to New York, being from Delaware, you don't get exposed to those, things. And then when you're I don't know, 16 or 17, and you're walking around New York, and you start to read this kind of expression that you really get turned on by, like, oh, look what people have done with words, and look, there's something really inspiring about it. But I mean, I don't think I've read any of these guys in 20 years now. You know?
I think you got the idea basically, and you applied it to yourself, and that was it then.
Well, yeah, you saw that people were not, it's like what is it, Alice in Wonderland? Is it Humpty Dumpty? It's like, there's a character, I think it's Humpty Dumpty, they're talking about words, and this guy is saying, are the words going to be the master, or am I going to be the master? But with that, he implies that he can use the wrong word for the right thing, or the right word for the wrong thing. It's actually a kind of psychosis when you go into it. But to me, there's something else in there where you don't have to be confined to the kind of rhetoric you get when, at least I got when I was growing up. So much of everything is conditioning, and so much of conditioning is language. But anyway, I suppose reading some of those poets at a certain time really lit me up somehow.
What about Patti Smith? Have you seen Patti recently, and what do you think of that stuff she did with her husband on that German movie, End of the
I like
World?
that piece, actually.
Yeah,
the thing I like about her most still is her voice. I think it's just a shame she doesn't make records. Even if she did cover records, she's just got an incredible voice. And I just got a Christmas note from her, like, about 3 days ago. Actually, I haven't seen her in years. But she does have a tiny new little book out. It's called Hanneman Press, I think. These books are about 2 inches high by 1.5 inches wide. Have you ever seen these?
No.
Yeah. Actually, I may do one for them. The guy who runs has been after me for like 3 years. And there's the Ginsberg one. I think there's 40 of them now. There's a little William Burroughs one. There's a just about everybody. There's even a wacky Bob Dylan one of his, when he was in his really heavy religious period. He did these little speeches and things, and these are like way off in terms of religious extremism and almost fundamentalist, you know. But yeah, that just came out last month. They're nice books. They're actually printed in India and just woven together by these fishermen. So it's like good for them because they make some extra money and they fit in your pocket. In fact, about 5 of them fit in your pocket, I guess.
Great for munis.
Yeah.
I don't want to take up too much time, so a couple more questions. On television's first album, of course, the picture was from Robert Mapplethorpe. Who did the artwork on this new one?
This is a friend of mine in Germany, like 5 years ago, actually just sent me a bunch of Xeroxes of, she's a painter, and included in this were these scientific drawings of Leonardo da Vinci. And it's about a month before the record was done, I found this file, and I thought, what is this? I didn't even know what it was. I couldn't remember. So I was showing it to a lot of people, and one guy actually knew what it was. He says, yeah, this is part of his weapons designs, and this was some kind of weird catapult system, you know, to fling rocks over castle walls or something. But it just it's actually 1/4, the CD cover is actually 1/4 of the whole drawing. It just, I don't know, it just had a flavor to me that looked good. It has a strange balance, but motion going to it at the same time, I think.
And any visual artists that you've seen in New York or in Europe recently that you've been particularly struck by their work?
Any visual artists? No, not really. I mean, there's a woman named Susan Hiller, who's American but has lived in England for probably 20 years. She did this cover for Flashlight, working on a 60-cent photo booth portrait and stuff. She's probably my favorite living visual artist because everything she does is really different. One show is very conceptual, and the next show is actual paintings, and the next show is like wallpaper with paint, but it's all, she actually is trained in anthropology, so she's coming at it from, she always has a very, it's not just aesthetics with her, like you look at it and there's a kind of impact that has to do often with, she did one really great piece, which was it took up most of a room. It was a park bench and a tape, which you would put on the headphones and listen to, and then on the wall were a series of color photographs which had then been printed, so they weren't shiny, of tombstones, all next to each other. But these are English tombstones, so they're about 1 foot wide and 1/2 foot high, so it looks like a series of concrete blocks photographed and names on it. And if you look at the dates, you realize all these people died really young. And as you listen to the tape, you realize all these people died saving somebody's life. Like the tape goes like, John Sullivan jumped off a bridge into a river, drowned while pushing his sister onto the shore. And it's like, it's really an amazing work because it incorporates this genuinely heroic element that you just never think of, this kind of thing that goes on. And she did another really wonderful piece, which was, she collected these turn-of-century kind of, what is that technique, tinted photographs of this one particular, almost like tidal wave that crashed in England, I think, and I don't know when, but it's just over and over, just slightly different angles of this wave on a beach. And this is, I don't know, again, there's something really elemental in this. It's not just the plastic rose on the wall or the empty bottle on the pedestal kind of aesthetic Duchamp move. There's something else going on with all her work. And I think she still has a work in the Tate Museum, which is a video actually, which is basically an 8mm thing transferred to video of a fire crackling in a fireplace with this voiceover that at first you think is a complete like a joke because the person's whispering like this the whole time, you know. But actually what they're telling is this whole story about in England, I think it was in 1979, 6 people on the same night. The BBC, I think it still does it, how do you say, stops broadcasting at 1 in the morning, and often people fall asleep with their TVs on. And the legend goes, here's the story, it's fairly eerie and interesting, that on the same night in 1979, 6 people fell asleep in different parts of England with their television on. And all of a sudden they were awakened by this very strange face on the screen coming on after broadcast is shut down, and this voice telling them about an Armageddon. And naturally all of them were completely terrified. You know, a couple of them thought, oh, this is a hoax, and they called the BBC right in the middle of the night, and they said, well, there's no broadcast going on. We don't, you know, what is this, a joke, an alien being talking about Armageddon on TV, you know? But one guy got it on video, and of course the BBC and Scotland Yard insisted on seeing it right away because they thought, well, somebody's broadcasting from somewhere and we want to pick it up, but this tape has disappeared, although I'm told you can get a transcript of it. Anyway, that's one of Susan Hiller's pieces, using this a woman telling this whole story over this video. It's a very eerie mix of like of humor and like uh-oh kind of thoughts.
Yeah, that's great.
Anyway, she's my favorite visual artist. Last I heard, she just taught down in is it UCLA, Pasadena or something for 6 months, and yeah, she's always coming up with something totally different. You know, it's probably why, in a sense, she's not as successful as some people are, because there's no style there. It's just each piece is unique on its own, you know.
I read this interview once with Julian Schnabel, who's become not one of my favorite people, but in it he said that at one point in his life he was looking around his studio and realized that there was no logical progression to his pieces. One didn't look like the other, they all looked different. And he goes, at first I thought that was a curse, but then later on I found out that it was a blessing, and I've worked with it since then.
Yeah, there is a real consistency with Schnabel, though.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure that Schnabel really has a style, and I frankly don't think his work's going to survive. You know, I think he was the noise of stockbrokers buying paintings cheap and selling big in the 80s. You know, I think the most you can say about his work is it's highly physical, but that's I don't know. I'm not keen on Schnabel.
That sort of triumvirate of him and Anselm Kiefer and Sigmund
but
Polka.
Kiefer and Polka are way up there, way up there, especially Kiefer, especially in terms of German history. And Polka, actually, there's a lot of Warhol in Polka when you really start looking at it, but yeah, these guys are
way cooler.
Way cooler. Sorry, Julian.
Well, Tom, why don't we stop right there? That seems like a good place to end. Thanks a lot.
Alrighty.
Well, do you want to do a hits and progress? Say this is Tom Verlaine on hits and progress.
I can do that stuff.
Okay. Sorry. Right back where the machines are. Yeah, I wish they would have come.